I should have listened. Everyone in town warned me about the house at the end of Rosewood Street, the one they called the cursed house. But I never believed in curses, ghosts, or any of those ridiculous stories people tell to scare each other. I was different, or so I thought. I was in Wilsberg to research its history, uncovering forgotten stories and hidden truths. But one story stood out more than the others. The house, the locals would never speak its name, only referring to it in hushed whispers. They said a little girl had disappeared there many years ago. Eleanor, her name was. She vanished on her 10th birthday, and her body was never found. Something about her story tugged at me. The archives had only bits and pieces of information, most of it too vague to be useful, so I decided to go to the house myself. It was an old, decrepit thing, with paint peeling off the walls and windows so filthy they barely reflected the evening sun. It looked dead. I wish I had turned back then. The front door creaked open far too easily, almost as if it had been waiting for me. The air inside was thick, musty, and stale. Dust hung in the air like tiny frozen particles, disturbed only by my hesitant footsteps. The house felt wrong, like it was alive but just barely, holding its breath in the shadows. I moved cautiously through the rooms, my flashlight beam shaking with each step. I felt like I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards beneath me sent shivers up my spine. The deeper I ventured, the heavier the air became, like I was being swallowed by the darkness around me. Then I found it. In the attic, tucked away in the corner, was a small, forgotten playroom. A child's bed sat neatly made, covered in dust, beside an old rocking chair that looked as though it hadn't moved in decades. And there, in the far corner, stood a doll god I should have left. The doll was old, its dress once delicate and white, now filthy and torn. Its hair hung in tangled clumps around its cracked porcelain face. But it was the eyes that stopped me in my tracks. Black, empty, yet somehow watching me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I felt the weight of those eyes on me like a predator's gaze. I don't know why, but I stepped closer. My fingers were trembling, the air around me growing colder, more oppressive with each second. Something inside me screamed to run, but I couldn't look away. Then the doll's head jerked toward me. My heart stopped. It moved. I know it moved. "Eleanor never left," a voice whispered. "No," rasped. It sounded like it came from the doll, but it was deeper, hollow, like it came from somewhere beneath the floor, like it was crawling out of the very walls. I stumbled back, my throat dry, my legs refusing to work. The doll's limbs began to twitch, slowly, as though awakening after years of sleep. Its joints creaked, its movements unnatural, stiff, and horrifying. And those eyes, those black, soulless eyes, locked onto mine. "Still here," the voice whispered again, chilling me to the bone. I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind me. My hand fumbled for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The walls seemed to close in, the darkness growing thicker, suffocating me. Then I heard it, a giggle, a child's giggle, faint but unmistakable, echoing around the room, distorted and twisted. I turned back toward the doll, and it was moving, stepping toward me on its crooked little legs, dragging its torn dress across the floor. "Eleanor," I gasped, backing into the door. The giggle grew louder, more sinister, filling the room, filling my head. The doll took another step and another. I screamed, clawing at the door, desperate to escape, but it was too late. I could feel it now, the house, the walls. It was alive, and it wanted me. The last thing I saw was the doll's twisted face, staring up at me, and those eyes, those black, lifeless eyes, locking me in their gaze. Then the lights went out. The darkness swallowed me whole, and for a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, just an endless void that stretched on forever. I felt weightless, like I was floating in a sea of shadows, but the suffocating dread held me tight, rooting me in place. I wasn't alone here. I could feel it. Something was watching me, circling me, closing in, The air was thick with whispers, low and insidious, like voices from another world. Eleanor never left, they said. She's still here. Suddenly, I was falling. My body jerked back to life, my feet hitting the ground hard. The room, the attic, was still there, but it had changed. The walls were warped, twisted like old flesh, pulsing with a dark energy. The air smelled of rot and decay, suffused with an unbearable cold that seeped into my bones. And the doll, it was gone. No, not gone, I could hear it. That horrible, giggling sound closer now behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Only shadows, flickering in the corners of my vision. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I had to get out. I had to. The giggle erupted into a scream, high-pitched and deafening, filling my ears until I thought my skull might crack. I fell to my knees, hands clasped over my ears. But the sound was inside me now, crawling through my mind like 1,000 spiders. Through the noise, I heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate. I looked up. Eleanor stood in front of me. She was just a girl, but her skin was pale, her eyes dark pits, and her lips twisted into a smile too wide for her face. In her arms, she cradled the doll, but now, the doll's head was turned. Its eyes locked onto mine with a malicious gleam. "You're not supposed to be here," Eleanor whispered, her voice soft but cold, like the whisper of wind through dead leaves. I tried to speak, to plead, but my throat was dry, my voice lost in the storm of fear raging inside me. She took a step closer, then another, her small figure casting an impossibly long shadow. "Play with us," she said. It wasn't a request, it was a command. And suddenly the room seemed to close in on me, the walls groaning like a living thing. "No, no, please," I gasped, stumbling backward, my back hitting the warped door behind me. Eleanor's smile grew wider, more grotesque. The doll's lifeless eyes flashed with something dark and terrible. And then everything went still, silent. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But then the doll moved. Its mouth, frozen in a twisted grin, began to stretch and open wider, impossibly wide, revealing row after row of sharp, jagged teeth. Its limbs jerked, twisting and contorting as it stepped forward, each movement stiff and unnatural. I screamed, throwing myself against the door, pounding, scratching, desperate to get out, but the wood wouldn't give. I felt cold fingers brush against my neck. I spun around, but there was no one. Yet I could feel them. Eleanor's hands, small and cold, pulling me toward her, pulling me into the darkness. "Stay with us," she whispered, her voice like ice in my ears. "Forever." The room was spinning now, the walls collapsing inward, the shadows swallowing everything. I could hear their voices, Eleanor and the doll, their whispers merging into one horrible, droning chant. And then, they were on me. I felt the cold grip of their hands, pulling me down, down into the floor, into the darkness. My body went numb, my vision blurred. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. And then, just like that, everything went silent. I don't know how long it's been. I don't know where I am now. There's no time here, no light, only the cold and the whispers. I see her sometimes in the darkness. Eleanor, she's still holding that doll, still smiling with those cold, hollow eyes. I can hear her giggling. Even now, she wants to play. She always wants to play. I'm still here. And if you ever find yourself near that house, if you feel something watching you from the windows, or hear a child's laughter in the dead of night, you'll know it's too late. I'm waiting, just like Eleanor.